y'all. Today's kind of a big day. I have received all of my jars in the mail. I ordered, because we're going to be canning up a whole bunch of jelly for a spring sale. I love this company because they send you all kinds of goodies with the jars, and the jars are very well packed. But these specific ones I like because there is no markings on them. Doesn't say ball, cur, doesn't have all the designs. So this makes it really easy for me to label them myself. So I'm going to go through all of these right now. Take the lids off, pop them in the dishwasher, get them all cleaned up so that we can start working on the jelly. Now this year I'm making 2 different kinds of jellies for my spring sale. I'm going to be doing a dandelion jelly and a rosé jelly. Both of them are really big and popular in this area. So I'm going to whip up a couple of pints of those each, and then I'm also going to make little sample jars that I've got little disposable spoons for, so that when I advertise, this is when the sale is, people can come around and they can actually test it and see if it's something that they are interested in. Since it's still kind of early for dandelions and they're just barely starting to show up, I'm going to hold off on those, let the bees and other insects have at it. And I'm going to focus on the rosé jelly. And we'll probably give it another couple of weeks before we start working on those dandelions. So for anybody wanting to follow along, this is the book that I'm using. It's on page 81 for champagne jelly. You can use champagne, rosé, prosecco. I mean, you can use pretty much any kind of wine that you would like in place of champagne. I just personally like the flavoring of the rosé once the alcohol has burned off and the sugar is added into the jelly. It's spectacular. A girlfriend of mine actually puts it in her coffee. On average, a single batch makes about 3 pints. Now, I'm going to triple this recipe with the big stock pot that I have back here. So to do that and make things go a little smoother, I'm going to prep the ingredients so that I'm not having to measure and dump at the same time, especially when you're working with pectin. It all needs to be added at once. So for this recipe, a single recipe requires 3 tablespoons of pectin. Since I'm tripling it, we're going to do 9. All right, there is our pectin ready to go. The other thing that needs to be added fairly quickly is sugar. So for this recipe, I'm going to go ahead and measure the sugar out and put that in a separate bowl as well. Yes, that's a lot of sugar. That's 12 cups of sugar. Each batch requires 4 cups. When it comes to this specific recipe, I have not found a way to substitute regular sugar, whether it's honey or a substitute of stevia. I've not had any luck with the pectin setting, and you end up with just like a syrup, which syrup is fine. There is absolutely nothing wrong with it. Again, you can use that in your coffee. You can use that as a syrup over your pancakes or waffles. It's phenomenal that way. But if you're looking for jelly in that form, unfortunately for me, I have only found that sugar sets correctly with the pectin. Now I need 3/4 of a cup of lemon juice as well. I'll go ahead and measure that out, get that prepared. Good thing I bought extra. Now you can use fresh squeezed lemon juice if you want to use that instead of this bottled stuff. That part doesn't make a difference. This is just easier for me. And the last thing that's in the recipe besides the rosé is going to be the juice, which is behind me. And we'll measure that out as we go. For those of y'all following along at home and want to do the exact same recipe I'm doing, I remove the alcohol from this before I use it in the jelly. And to do that, you have to boil it for a minimum of 3 hours. I do 4 just to make sure. Keep in mind that you're going to lose half your volume, so you'll need to make sure that you've got plenty of these bottles on hand. These are very cheap. This one was like $8, so it's not that big of a deal. If you don't want to go through that kind of a time-consuming process, I can assure you, you can eat an entire jar of this jelly and you're not going to have any effects from the alcohol, because it's literally 1 1/4 cup of this for every 3 pints. It's split amongst every 3 pints. So you're not getting much of at all in terms of alcohol. But that is how you can remove the alcohol from this. Let it boil for a minimum of 3 hours, and then you can add it into your recipe. So since I am tripling this recipe, I'm going to need 9 cups of juice. Now, the original recipe says just raspberry juice, but I have found that this cran raspberry is phenomenal with it. Great combination. And again, you can change it up. If you don't like cranberry juice, you can do apple. If you don't like apple, you can do raspberry. If you don't like raspberry, you can do grape. You can just combine if you want to do it that way as well. You get all different kinds of flavors every time you make this jelly. Next, we're going to add our lemon juice. Now, the recipe requires 1/4 cup per batch. Since we're tripling it, I have 3/4 cup. Our next step is going to be to add the pectin. Now, before you add the pectin, you have to make sure that your ladles, your jars, your lids, your rings, that everything that you need is ready and on standby, because this pectin is going to set really fast, and the longer it sits in your container, the harder it's going to be to scoop out and put into your jars. And your canner is already preheated to a temperature that is about the same as the jelly. Let's put the hair up for this. You're going to need to make sure that nothing gets in your way as you prepare this jelly. Let's do it. We are going to turn our heat on. Now in here we have the juice, the cranberry raspberry juice and the lemon juice. And we are going to slowly, very slowly, stir in the pectin. Now you want to make sure that your heat is on high for this process. You can already see that it's kind of gelling a little bit. Just stir this frequently, like every 15 seconds or so, until it gets to a boil. Okay, so for this next part, I'm going to tell you about it now. When we add the sugar, you have to stir constantly. You cannot stop at all during that process until it returns to a full boil. And I'm talking a rolling boil that does not go down when you stir it. Once you hit that point, set a timer for 1 minute. And during that 1 minute, you are still constantly stirring. Your arms are going to get tired. If you need help, make sure you've got somebody on standby. But you're going to be switching back and forth, and you're going to be stirring for almost 5 minutes straight. Be ready for that. You also want to make sure that whatever pot you're using has plenty of headspace, because what is going to happen is this is going to foam up and rise, and you do not want hot, syrupy sugar spilling everywhere. Believe me, I've done it twice, and it's a nightmare. Now you're going to add your sugar. And you are going to stir this constantly. Do not stop under any circumstances. Okay, so we're starting to see a little bit of steam, so it should start boiling soon. I just went ahead and paused it at this point so that you weren't just watching me stir forever and ever and ever. So it's been about another 5 minutes. So in total, stirring this. I've probably been stirring about 8 minutes total, just because I tripled the recipe. So if you do that, if you double, triple, quadruple the recipe, be prepared to stir for even longer. There it is. There's our rolling boil. So now I set the timer. You're going to notice it rising. Timer is set for 1 minute. You want to stir this vigorously. You don't want it to overflow. All right, after your 1 minute is up, turn off the heat. You'll remove it from the heat completely. Now that we've removed it from the heat completely, we are going to add in our rosé and give it a good stir. And now your timer is set. This is going to set up really fast. So we need to be ready with our jars. You can also remove the foam because it is very foamy. So if you want like really nice crystal clear jelly, it's a good idea to remove that. If aesthetics don't bother you, then you can leave the foam. Because I'm selling this, I'm going to remove it. At least as much as I can. If you do leave it, it just kind of gives it a bubbly look on the inside. And you'll see this rise to the top once the canning process is over with. Now, if you don't feel like canning your jellies, you don't have to. I would suggest making a small batch. If you're not going to can anything up, you can just put it in your fridge. And on average, it lasts about 6 months. Personally, I've had mine last way longer than that. So now we're going to start putting it in our jars. And you're going to leave 1/4 of an inch headspace. For those of you that don't know how much 1/4 of an inch is, it's basically that top ring on the jar. About right there. Now you can speed this process up if you would like. Put it into a any kind of container that you can pour and just pour into your jars. I personally like ladling because I have better control over the froth that's still in the container. And it also takes a little bit longer for it to set up the thicker the jelly is. Meaning this container that it's in is going to keep it pretty warm so it doesn't set up as fast. As soon as you put it into these jars or you put it into another container, it begins to cool rapidly, and that's what's going to set that jelly. I like to make little sample containers as well, which are these little guys, especially if I'm selling or if I want to give them out as gifts, because it kind of just gives people the chance to test it out before they buy it, see if they're even going to like it. or, you know, with friends and neighbors, if they really do like it, they like the sampler, then they're more willing to buy from me as well. Or I will know if they don't want it, if they didn't like it, you know, Christmas gifts, things of that nature. It just makes things easier without wasting a lot of resources. No, just shy. So when something like this happens, usually what I do is I'll keep this jar, but I think for today, see if I can maybe take it out of one of the samplers. Because the samplers are just that. It's just for people to sample. So I don't have to worry about canning these if I don't want to. But in the event somebody wants to buy one, I'll probably still do that. So now we're going to wipe down each one of these jars, and we're going to get all of that sugary syrup off of the top. You don't want that there when you're trying to can, because it can interfere with the seal. Very hot, so be careful. Stuff is a sticky, sticky mess. Same with all of the little ones. Get those all wiped down. Just like that. All right. Now, Ball has already said you do not have to heat your lids up anymore, but I'll be honest, I get a much better seal when I do this. Now, you're not cinching these lids down. You're just making them fingertip tight, which means you can't loosen it back up. You want it a little bit tighter than that. You don't want to be able to loosen it like that. That's, to me, that's too loose because I can take it off with one hand. So I just tighten it enough to where that's not going to happen. And I do that with each one of them. Yeah, retest that one. Okay. Okay, we're going to do the same thing with the little guys. I know you can't see them over here. Kind of have them blocked a little bit. But same thing, fingertip tight. All right. Now we're going to load them up. So we are going to water bath can these jars. Now, in order to water bath can, the water has to be over the top of the jars. That water is really, really hot. So I'm going to switch over to my grippers. Now this is a pressure canner. However, I am going to be using it as a water bath canner for this process. There we go. I'm going to put some more water in it because we want the water to be about 2 inches above the jars. Doesn't want to stay because it's not heavy enough. There we go. So we're going to let this come to a boil, and once it's boiling, if you're using a regular stock pot or water bath canner, you'll just put the lid on and start your time. I don't have a container big enough to do that with unless I use the one that I just cooked out of, so I'm going to use the pressure canner. To use a pressure canner as a water bath canner, all you have to do is remove the weight. Once this starts boiling, I'm going to put the lid on, remove the weight, and set my timer. Now the recipe calls for 10 minutes processing time, but that is if you are 1,000 feet or lower in elevation. I'm at 3,000 feet, so I have to add an additional 10 minutes processing time for a full 20 minutes before this is done. As you can see, we're bubbling now, so I'm going to put the lid on and then take off the weight. I'm also going to secure this into place. Not as if I was going to pressure can it, but just enough that it's not going to go anywhere. Woo! And now I'm going to set my timer for 20 minutes. And we'll be back in a little bit.
I'm not exactly sure why my mic cut out here, but basically all I'm saying is at this point, you're going to do 2 10-minute sessions. Once your time is up, you're going to leave it alone for 10 minutes. Turn the heat off, don't touch it for 10 minutes. After that, you'll take your lid off and allow it to sit for another 10 minutes before you remove anything out of the canner. This just helps to prevent any kind of temperature shock that could possibly break your jars.
All right, our first 10 minutes is up, so we're going to remove the lid of this. Okay, we're going to give this another 10 minutes before we take anything out. I will stand my jar up though, since one did fall over. There we go. Okay, another 10 minutes and we'll be right back. So now at this point, we're just going to let these sit for the next 24 hours completely undisturbed. You don't want to move them. You don't want to try to take the lids off, the rings off, nothing. Just leave them be. That's going to give them plenty of time to set, for the pectin to set, and for them to be perfectly ready to go.
After 24 hours, the jars are ready to go. At this point, I'm just going to remove the rings, do the lift test on each and every one of them, wipe them down really good, make sure there's nothing sticky left behind. And then I'll put the rings back on and label them. This jelly has become absolutely one of my favorites. It is right there along with the dandelion jelly. Whether you put a spoonful in your coffee in the morning or you like it on your toast or bagels, it is such a delight. It is so good. And I really hope that you guys give it a shot. Try it yourself. And if you do, comment below. Let me know what you think. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you decide to change anything up, maybe use a different kind of juice in it for a different flavor, go for it. I'm so curious to see everybody's versions. Be sure to check back on my page frequently. Hopefully within the next week or so, I'll have the dandelion jelly video up. I'm just waiting on a lot more of them to grow. In the meantime, thank you so much for sticking around and watching my videos. And I hope I've helped you all learn something new, or just even if I'm just background noise for you. We'll see you guys in the next video.